was one hell of a speech last night, wasn't it? The State of the Union address by President Biden. I was blown away. I think it was one of the best speeches of his. Well, actually, I think it was one of the best State of the Union speeches I've ever heard in my whole entire life. And I've been listening to them since the 1950s. So that's not with quite the ear that I have today, but I'll tell you, that was a barn burner. And I'd love to get your thoughts on this. By the way, people are talking about, well, Biden shouldn't run for re-election, quack, 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 quack. Jonathan Last posted a fascinating analysis over at the Bulwark. The Triad is his newsletter. He noted that, before the midterm elections, 52% of Democrats said Biden should run for re-election. After the midterms, only 37%, which is weird. I have a feeling that number is going to be a hell of a lot higher today. But here's where it gets really interesting. He points out that at this point in their presidencies, Obama, Reagan, and Clinton, who were all reelected, were below 50% in terms of support for a second term, just like Biden is right now, or at least was yesterday. The only two presidents in modern history who had above 50% support for a second term at this point in their presidency were Jimmy Carter and George Herbert Walker Bush. And neither of them, both of them ran for a second term, neither of them got reelected. So that's pretty strange. But Biden started out his, the bottom line there is that, history suggests that running for a second term might not be such a bad idea. And, Biden is 80 years old, but he certainly dispelled any notion last night that he's lacking in energy or wit or confidence or competence. This guy is as sharp as they come right now at the age of 80, which is, remarkable. Impressive, I think, is a better word. Increasingly as we are, as modern science gets better, and certainly as things like, learning how to eat right and how to exercise and the impact of those things. And now there are all kinds of, both prescription and non-prescription supplements that people take to forestall aging. Everything from rapamycin and metformin and naltrexone to, on the prescription side, to the non-prescription side, people taking turmeric and ficitin and there's a bunch of supplements that, there's all this buzz. All these billionaires are taking this stuff. So, it wouldn't surprise me if Biden is at least, doing something to keep himself young, and God bless him. So anyhow, he came out and basically pointed out that, 40 years, I mean, he didn't say it in these words, but the 40 years of Reaganomics has hollowed out our middle class, and it's time to rebuild it. He pointed out that unemployment is now lower than, the last time it was this low was in the 1960s. He pointed out that he has created 800,000 good manufacturing jobs, 12 million new jobs, 12 million new jobs overall. He has overseen the creation of more jobs in 2 years than any president in history in an entire full 4-year term. I mean, it's literally historic. He noted that there were 10 million new small businesses opened in the last 2 years, that the chip industry is coming back to the United States. He talked about that, how, we couldn't even make cars because all the chips are coming from overseas. We had all these supply chain problems. That's not going to happen anymore. He talked about how there has been a $300 billion investment, private investment. This is not government investment. This is the result of government setting the stage, essentially, by building infrastructure and tweaking tax policy to encourage some policies and discourage others. What government does, basically, is it provides the soil in which small businesses, new businesses, and even large businesses can root themselves. And they're doing it. $300 billion in private investment in manufacturing in the United States. More than 20,000 new infrastructure projects all over the country. And he made a great joke about it. He was like, I know a lot of you didn't vote for this, but you sure do show up for the groundbreakings, and I'll see you at the next groundbreaking. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but you get it. He pointed out that healthcare costs have come down. He bragged about $35 insulin for seniors and said, hey, now let's give $35 insulin to everybody. It only costs them $12 to make this stuff, or $14. You know, why are they selling it for $500? It was brilliant. It was an absolutely brilliant speech. He talked about Medicare negotiating drug prices for the first time since that was outlawed in 2003 by George W. Bush's scam to privatize Medicare. The massive investments in new technologies to fight climate change. His Inflation Reduction Act is the largest piece of climate change legislation ever put into law here in the United States. It was basically an updated version of FDR's New Deal. Only instead of saying, proactively, this is what I'm going to do, which he did, a year ago, he did it. He was saying, look at what we accomplished, which is pretty amazing, because before last night, the polls were showing that the majority of Americans thought that Joe Biden hadn't done much. Only, as I recall, it was around 36% of Americans were familiar with his accomplishments, which is an indictment, frankly, of our media, that they are not informing people of what's actually going on. Instead, they're just, amplifying the right-wing voices. Speaking of the right-wing voices, over at The Writing today, Howard put together a great newsletter. The New York Post, their headline today, in newsstands all over New York City, Biden's State of the Union set new records for dishonesty and emptiness. Their front page story, he offered lie after lie in a shameless bid to fool the electorate ahead of his 2024 run for re-election. Right, well, this is a newspaper owned by a billionaire, and Biden was calling for taxes on billionaires, so surprise, surprise. Over at Front Page, another right-wing site, Biden's State of the Union promises 2 more years of misery. And then they started it out. If you like 2021 and 2022, worse is coming. Well, yeah, I kind of liked them. The Federalist, don't fall for Biden's economic fairy tale. The president's biggest whopper, I'm a capitalist. These people are just frantic. I'm telling you, they just don't know what to do with a guy who comes across as an average American, who speaks the language of average Americans, and who's actually getting things done that people love. The Wall Street Journal, a headline, the State of the Union contradiction. If Biden is such a success, why aren't Americans pleased? Well, it might have something to do with you, Wall Street Journal. Also owned by the Murdoch empire. National Review, Biden's fantasy land. Fox News, it's unlikely Biden's rambling State of the Union inspired Americans to, quote, finish the job. President Biden offered a mashup of falsehoods and, quack, quack, quack. PJ Media, let's scrap the State of the Union address. Yes, he did a great job, right? He did such a great job that right-wing media is saying, end the State of the Union. And did you catch Sarah Huckabee Sanders? It was this was the Republican rebuttal, the official Republican rebuttal, in front of a crappy Skype digital background, I think, from what I'm seeing on the interwebs. This was American Carnage 2.0, Trump's State of the Union address. Just all downbeat and hysterical, talking about, a woke mob is, you wanted a drinking game, and take a drink every time Sarah Huckabee Sanders says woke, right? But over at Red State, the headline, Huckabee Sanders' response to Biden fever dream hits all the right notes. And over at American Greatness, they're asking, did Biden tell China to send the balloon? Oh, my God. Biden pointed out that he said he was calling for higher taxes on corporations and the morbidly rich. He pointed out, and this is a quote, he said, in 2020, 55 of the biggest companies in America made $40 billion in profits and paid zero in federal income taxes. That's simply not fair. Excuse me. And then he pointed out that he got past this 15% minimum tax. Whoa. On billion. He went on to say, no billionaire should pay a lower tax rate than a school teacher or a firefighter. By the way, if you look for it, I used to have it. I don't know what happened to it or where it is, but there's this quote of Ronald Reagan at a high school saying, "Do you think rich people should pay lower taxes than school bus drivers?" And all the kids go, "No!" And he says, "I agree. I don't think they should either." So it's like, and then of course he went on to cut taxes on rich people. Biden pointed out that he has cut the national deficit by the annual deficit by more than $1.7 billion. He pointed out that 25% of the entire national debt run up over a 240-plus year period was run up during Donald Trump's presidency, just during those 4 years. Another one that got all the Republicans. By the way, Marjorie Taylor Greene shouting liar in her Cruella de Vil outfit had to be the most disgusting, low-class, pathetic. I lack adjectives, but it's just as a former Georgia. I lived in Georgia for 13 years. I'm embarrassed to even say I lived in Georgia. This woman represents Georgia in the House of Representatives. He pointed out that the Republicans want to sunset Social Security and Medicare. Now that's the exact language from Rick Scott's plan. Rick Scott, the most powerful, second to Mitch McConnell, the second most powerful Republican in the Senate. He put it in writing. Mike Lee is on tape saying we need to end Social Security and pull it out by the root, throw it away. Lindsey Graham, Ron Johnson, all of them have called for ending Social Security or privatizing it. George W. Bush campaigned on it in 2005. And then when Biden talked about banning assault weapons, you had all these Republicans who were wearing AR-15 pins on their lapels, booing him on that. This was a George W. Bush initiative. No, I'm sorry. It was a Bill Clinton initiative. I'm wrong. George W. Bush failed to renew it. He goes on to say, for the last few years, our democracy has been threatened, attacked, and put at risk. Put to the test here in this very room on January 6th. And at that point, Kevin McCarthy, when Biden talked about how we must all speak out, there is no place for political violence in America, Kevin McCarthy refused to stand up. It was one of the most pathetic moments of the McCarthy speakership so far.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
So what did you think about the State of the Union address? Like I said, I thought it was the best speech, the best State of the Union of my lifetime.